going to
Yeah.
drop the agenda into the chat as well.
Great. Thanks, Jack.
Yep.
So hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Caruso, for those of you who might be new to this space, and I work at the Montgomery County Food Council. I lead some of our advocacy and policy work, in addition to wearing many other hats across the organization. It's great to see everyone joining us today for our first food system advocacy community call of 2024. Jack will go into some more details later about our thoughts for the year and why it was that we paused these calls for a few months. But we are really excited to bring everyone back together and feature our wonderful partner, Michael J. Wilson, in a few minutes to share more about his role at Maryland Hunger Solutions in the legislative session and the Food System Resiliency Council. But before that, I want to introduce two folks to you all. And while that's happening, I welcome you to introduce yourself in the chat. And if you have an organizational affiliation, please feel free to share that as well. But before we get to Michael J., first I'm actually going to have Leah Hunter introduce herself briefly. And then I'm going to turn it over to our new executive director, Naya Chejane, to just share some words with the group. So Leah, starting with you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Leah Hunter, and I've been interning with the Food Council for about 6 months now. I've been working on a lot of policy stuff, writing testimony, a lot of communication stuff. It's been really fun.
Thanks, Leah. And yeah, we wanted you all to get to meet folks that are working behind the scenes on some of this work. And Leah has been just a wonderful addition to our team, both in the policy space as well as across our entire work. And if you've seen our Instagram lately, Leah has played a big role in our social media presence as well. But I know that folks on the call who haven't had a chance to meet Naya yet are, I'm sure, really excited to officially meet her in 2D. And we hope that folks get a chance to meet her in 3D soon, if you haven't. But I'll turn it over to Naya to introduce herself to this convening.
Thank you, Michelle, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our very first advocacy call for 2024. My name is Naya Chejane. I'm the executive director at Montgomery County Food Council, and I believe I'm in my sixth or seventh week now. And so it's been really interesting learning, meeting new people, meeting you all, and I really hope that I can get to connect with you guys in different ways through all the different firms that we hold here. I want to encourage you to network with each other, because that's one of the reasons why we create this space, so you guys can get to know each other and connect. And we really hope that, you know, these calls will be a way to kind of help create that peer-to-peer learning, or at least help you start it off, because I think that's an important part of being a partner and being within the food system. So I thank you all for the warm welcome, for those of you whom I have met, and I look forward to meeting you. Michael J., I know we were supposed to meet, but I actually do look forward to having a more formal meet and greet. Thank you all, and have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll still be here, and I'll mute myself. Thank you, Michelle. Over to you.
Thanks, Naya. Please drive safe. We appreciate that you are joining us in transit from one in-person meeting back to something else. So thanks so much. So for those, if folks have hopped on in the last couple of minutes, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. And I think, Jack, can I turn it over to you to introduce Michael J? And then I think, so we're gonna hear from Michael J for about 20 minutes, and then there's gonna be time for Q&A. And then Jack and I are gonna share some more information about the Food Council's advocacy work. And then there'll be time, as you see in the agenda, hopefully, for folks to share updates with this group from their spaces. So with that, Jack, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. And with that, I want to introduce Michael J. Wilson, who will be our featured speaker today, wearing multiple hats like he always does, as both Maryland Hunger Solutions and the Food System Resiliency Council, as he puts his hat on. And we're always so thankful for Michael J. for joining us and speaking to our community, as well as helping us as well as we work through things during the legislative session and this time of the year. So I'm going to read a little bit about Michael J. And I made you a co-host, so you should have screen sharing if you want to. Obviously, no worries if not. But I'm just going to read a little bit about you and then turn it on over. Michael joined Maryland Hunger Solutions in July of 2013 as director. In this role, he is helping to lead Maryland's premier hunger, advocacy, education, and outreach organization as it works to end hunger and improve the nutrition, health, economic security, and well-being of low-income families in Maryland. Michael serves in a leadership role in many statewide coalitions and is a collaborator with other anti-poverty advocates. Michael currently chairs the board of the formerly chaired the board of the Montgomery County Food Council, former co-chair of the Prince George's County Food Equity Council, and served on the Howard County Food Task Force. He also serves as a member of the Metropolitan Washington Council of Government, Food and Agricultural Regional Member Advisory Committee, and is the co-chair of the State Maryland Food System Resiliency Council. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Michael J.
Thank you, Jack. Now, you may wonder, why did he bite the apple then? You know, he had many opportunities to eat before the meeting or during the introduction or after the meeting later on. Why did he interrupt and do it now? Well, simply, the reason is because everybody doesn't eat whenever they want to. And I just want to emphasize that. Some people eat whenever they want to, and some people eat when they can. And I want to acknowledge that there are a lot of folks who eat when they can and not on the schedule that you expect them to eat. And so I want to recognize that. I'm not going to start saying hi to people because I know many of you have been here in meetings, and the ones of you who are messaging me, I'm acknowledging you. Yes, I see you. But I'm glad to be invited to be here. I'm glad to work with all of you and with the Montgomery County Food Council. I have really enjoyed all the time that we've spent together when I was on the board, before I was on the board, and now. So I'm looking forward to kind of spouting off here for a little while. I am not going to do slides. I don't like slides. I'm the person who prefers to listen to news on the radio than on television. So I'm going to just give you information, and I will give you things you can cite and you can take notes. I know this is being recorded, so you can play it back and listen to it alongside your favorite radio shows another time. I want to start by just acknowledging the work of the Food Council is important, not just in Montgomery County, but across the state of Maryland. You are a leading light, and I really want to recognize that. I started Maryland Hunger Solutions, Jack read the bio, and Maryland Hunger Solutions is a statewide, nonpartisan, nonprofit working to end hunger in the state of Maryland. We've been doing that since 2007 and working with partners across the state. I moved out of Montgomery County in 2014, but I was a longtime Montgomery County resident, and some people know me from some of that work as well. So I am really partial to the work that you're doing as well. My kids went through the Montgomery County school system. I really appreciate it. So I want to start with a couple of, framing points. And if I get close to 5 minutes before I'm done, Jack, just give me the sign because I'll start to wrap up. Because I'm going to go through a long list of things, and I think the list is important. The work that we do is about the food system. The work that we do is about the entire food systems, from farmers to restaurants, to gardens, to schools, to state programs, to federal programs, to farmers markets, to every consumer who depends on food safety, food access, food resilience, everyone. But it's especially important, the work that we do, to folks who are experiencing poverty. The folks who are experiencing poverty need additional assistance because this is not an equal society. And people who are treated, in a different way for lots of reasons are the folks for whom we advocate. And I'll talk about that some as I go through. And if I was going to give you one book suggestion to read, if you haven't read it, is $2 a Day by Catherine Eden and Luke Schaefer. Catherine Eden used to be at Johns Hopkins. She's moved on now. I think she's at Princeton. But $2 a Day is a great book because it talks about the impact of food insecurity in all of its different ways, but all the other things that impact folks as well. And you cannot read this book and not be impacted. If you've never read it, I think it's well worth reading. And what the authors acknowledge in the book is, first, the fact that who can survive on $2 a day? I mean, that's the first thing. People, how can people survive on $2? That can't be true. And so you really have to read the book to understand how that happens and how challenging that is and all the things people do to get through that. The work that we do in Maryland Hunger Solutions, and I know with others, so I'll just say it for Maryland Hungers, and it may apply to other organizations as well, is not to pass a bill. That's not what we do. Though passing a bill may be part of what we do. The work that we do is not to enact a law, though enacting a law may be part of the solution that we're seeking to do. We are really looking to build a broader movement to address food insecurity throughout this state and throughout this country. And building that movement is not just about passing a bill. You know, we really need to be able to educate policymakers, partners, the press, and the public very much about the challenges that are going on. If you walk into your state legislator's office today, and I suspect you're not going to do that, but if you did, and you told them, you know, the minimum SNAP benefit is $23 a month, most of them wouldn't recognize that. They don't know that. That's not a data point they keep in their head. You know, they may think about other things, but they would immediately recognize that it's insufficient. It's insufficient for health reasons. It's insufficient for economic. It's just insufficient. And so once we've educated people to that, then we can have the conversation about how we change that or how we address that or all the things that we need to do about that. But until we get that part of the conversation, it's not enough. So I'm not going to start, I'm going to talk a little bit, I'm going to mention the Great Recession, because when you talk about the work that we do and the food system, you know, you could start at any point. You could start in the 40s, you could start in the 60s, you can start, but I'm going to reference the Great Recession because the Great Recession is something I think most people here will remember, and some of the changes that we made, which were helpful. And then we cut those changes back and went back to the way things were. And that's not a successful way to really operate. But then I want to talk about the pandemic, because the pandemic is something all of us lived through. I had posted something on Facebook earlier today showing me working from home, which was 4 years ago today. 4 years ago today is when many things were beginning to shut down. And, you know, for some people, it was a privilege to work from home, and other folks, it was impossible, and all of the challenges that the pandemic brought to us. But for those of us, and that includes everybody on this call, who survived the pandemic, and everyone did not survive, you know, there were lots of things that happened in the pandemic that were steps forward. You know, we went to emergency allotments for SNAP benefits. We didn't give people the minimum. We gave people the maximum allowable benefit. We eliminated the interview requirements for SNAP beneficiaries. We paused the able-bodied adults without a dependence rule, the ABOD rules. I hate the ABOD rule. We'll talk about that later. We eased it for college students who were able to utilize SNAP benefits. We had healthy school meals for every student in the country, not just in Maryland, but in Mississippi as well. And I always pick on Mississippi because that's what I need to do. Mississippi needs to do better. But every student in public school in this country got students. The WIC program was refigured so that moms didn't have to come into the office with their kids, that they could do stuff remotely as well. We made such gains. We made such, you know, changes that were really helpful. And then the pandemic was over. It was over. You know, I talked to somebody yesterday who has COVID. It was over, and we decided to go back to where it was, as if we learned nothing from the challenges, as if we couldn't take advantage of any of the things that we learned. And so that's why it's hard to make progress, when people don't pay attention. And by people, I mean elected officials, I mean policymakers, I mean, you know, everyone who doesn't recognize that we can make changes, because we made those changes. We know we can do better. And so we're gonna, I want to talk a little bit about that. I originally had planned on talking about the history of the changes that we've made with SNAP and the history of the changes we made with school meals. And then I realized I don't have time to do both because it's just too much. We have made progress. We've made good progress. But I'm going to focus just on SNAP for today, and talk about the changes that we've made and the distance that we've come. I want to recognize we have made changes. We have come a distance. Not enough, not nearly enough. But we have made changes, and those changes have not come out of the kindness of the hearts of elected officials. Those changes have come because we, all of us, have worked for them. We've advocated for them. We've written, we've called, we've met, we've done everything to inch along to get to where we are. And it's still not enough. So Maryland Hunger Solutions was formed in 2007 by the Food Research and Action Center. And at that point began to operate and do things. I was not the director at the time. In 2008, Maryland Hunger Solutions became a SNAP outreach partner of the state of Maryland. So we could actually do SNAP outreach and actually sign people up for SNAP. In 2010, we were able to get the state to do the EBT pilot program for farmers markets so that SNAP beneficiaries could use their benefits at farmers markets and get matching dollars. At the time, it was called Baltimore Bucks, and it was really focused a lot around Baltimore. And it's spread. I'm not saying it hasn't gotten bigger and better. It has, but that was one of those things that happened. In 2012, there was Hurricane Sandy, which wreaked havoc up and down the East Coast, and we were able to push the state to get DSNAP, because one of the things that's true about the SNAP program is there's also a disaster SNAP provision, that when disasters happen, states can ask for, DSNAP and provide people with SNAP benefits, even folks who aren't normally eligible, who are impacted by disasters. In 2016, we were able to, for the first time, do a supplemental benefit in SNAP. And I'm going to talk about this one for a little bit because it was a landmark moving forward, not as much as we wanted, but it was interesting to learn how we could do this. So Maryland Hunger Solutions didn't do this by ourselves. We had partners from across the state, including the Montgomery County Food Council, including Manna Food Center, including folks from all around the state. And one of the people who testified was a woman named Margaret Dubinsky, who was getting benefits over at and getting food from Manna Food Center. And she testified in front of the legislature and said, it used to be that I made donations to food banks, and now I'm getting food from food banks myself. And it's really a struggle for me. And she was, I think, 89 years old at the time. Talk about how tough it was to get by on the benefit at that time, which was $16 a month. 16. And then we had a gentleman who'd been working with Paul's Place in Baltimore City named Ronald Bailey. And Ronald Bailey said he had been homeless and he turned his life around and was living in subsidized housing, but getting Social Security. And he said, if I had more than $16 a month, maybe sometimes I could have a little meat in my spaghetti. It's just and I'm looking particularly at Mary and Rona and others, when people who are experiencing poverty can tell their own stories, it is powerful. It's not just us giving people data. It's not just us making policy arguments. It's about people who raise their hands and say, this impacts me in this way. And so we get to the Senate hearing, we're about to have the hearing, and the chairman says, oh, we've met with these people, because we've had meetings with senators and said, we want to help, but we can't help everybody. And we'd had a bill to make sure that nobody got less than $30 a month. This is in 2016. $30 was our ask. He said, we can't do it for everybody, so we're just going to do it for seniors. Just going to do it for seniors, so folks who are 65 years and over. And Ronald Bailey, formerly homeless, raised his hand, spoke truth and said, Mr. Chairman, that won't do anything for me because I'm only 62. And the chairman said, okay, we'll make it 62 then. It's mind-boggling how policy is made only because Ronald Bailey happened to be on the dais and was willing to speak up and say, hey, I'm only 62, and that's how I got to be 62. I said, Ronald, you should have told him you were 60. No, you should never lie when you're testifying. No. but it's the way differences happen that you can't plan for. You can't put in a strategic plan or in a campaign plan. It's just the strength of the diversity of our. So we got it to be 62. And listen, there's no good reason for it to be 62, you know. And were we happy that they were only doing it for seniors? No. It was half a loaf. Do you take half a loaf when you're faced with that? You take half a loaf because that's what you can get. But that doesn't mean you don't come back and fight for more. And so it was so clear to us that we had begun a path to be able to raise the minimum benefit for folks. We really wanted people to know. And so in 2017, we worked on, you know, narrowing the felon ban. There was a ban on felons getting SNAP benefits. And particularly, excuse me, felons, drug felons. And that had come down from the federal law. Now, why are drug felons the ones who can't get SNAP benefits? You know, not rapists, you know, not murderers, not folks who've done assault, just people who have served their time as drug felons and come out and can't get SNAP. Made no sense. And so we were able to narrow that now. There are very few felons in Maryland who are not able to get benefits when they come out. But it makes no sense to have someone be incarcerated where they're getting 3 hot meals, 3 hots in a cot, not great meals, but getting 3 hots and come out and have to struggle for food. It doesn't help them. It doesn't help our communities. It makes no sense. And so we've continued to fight against this as well, because it's just another way that we're holding people down. In 2021, we were able to create the Campus Hunger Program. So campuses that were working against hunger on their campuses could do matching dollars and could apply to the state and get matching dollars to do hunger programs. We were very focused because we know, A, that campuses the students aren't just kids, that 1 in 5 college students is actually a parent, that we're dealing with campuses that it's not just about college students, that there are low-income people who work on campuses and maintenance and sanitation and other jobs who are also low income. And it's not just about college students. It's about making these campuses really islands of fighting food insecurity. And so we've been working with them to try to address this in a broader way. Not enough matching dollars. It shouldn't be matching dollars. The state should be able to invest in this. But that was a partial victory as well. And we were able to, in 2022, to increase the supplemental benefit again from the $30 to $40. Is it enough? No, but we're continuing to make progress. And then we come to 2024. In 2024, after the end of emergency allotments, after the end of all of the pandemic relief, we knew that we needed to do more. And the state of New Jersey decided, you know, we're going to do $95. $95 is make sure nobody gets less than 95. Now, 95 won't make anybody rich, but it is a much more substantial benefit. This District of Columbia did something different. They called Give DC a Raise. And so they did a 10% increase for everybody along the spectrum who are getting benefits. And that's better than just leaving it to the federal level. Why should we be just at the $23 federal level in Maryland? You know, we're not Mississippi. We can do better. And so, you know, we've been working on this for months now. And, you know, Montgomery County Food Council has been part of it, as well as many other organizations. And people have been testifying and writing letters and doing blogs and all of the things that you need to do to make policy happen. And so what the state Senate passed yesterday was an increase to $50. And they're going to eliminate the 62 and drop it down to 60. So I have 2 feelings about this, right? You know, we're still leaving out disabled folks. Disabled folks don't get that. They'll still be at 23. People coming out of incarceration don't get that. They still only get the 23. We're not, people who are experiencing homelessness still get the 20. We've not done enough. We needed to do more. But in a tough budget year, we're going to get 50, and we're going to lower the age for some people, it's a small step forward. But we're going to take this and we're going to keep moving forward. We can't not accept this and continue to move forward. If you think we can do better this year and you want to call your legislator, do it. I'm with you. I am with you. I would love to do more. But here's where we are. And I want us to recognize that all the work that we did is what got us this. We didn't get this from the kindness of their hearts. We got this because we fought for this, and it's not done yet. The House of Delegates still has to pass it, and so I'm seeing questions about the effective date. I don't know that yet, so it hasn't passed, so it's not certain. If the House doesn't pass this, we'll get nothing, and so we have to continue all the efforts that we're doing. It's really critical that when we think about doing this kind of work, that we don't think about it as just passing the bill, that we don't think about it as just getting somebody to introduce a bill and then it's going to happen. There are more than 2,000, there are between 2,000 and 3,000 bills introduced in Maryland State Legislature every year. They don't all pass. They don't all get done, even the good ones. So it's a continuing struggle, and it's a continuing struggle, not just what we want our state to do, but what we want our nation to do. So the farm bill that the Congress is supposed to have done, that they have not done, frustrates me to no end, because to be honest, the House of Representatives has done nothing, and we need them to do more. We have to force them to be more responsive. We just have so much more work to do, and I'm not tired, and I know you're not tired, and there's no end to the work that we do. But we have a lot. I wanna pause. There's a great song by Gil Scott-Heron called 95 South, and he sings it really well, better than I could sing it. But he talks about the image about being in the middle of the mountain, about looking back on all the things that we've done, all the things we've come through, but looking up and all the things we have yet to do. He says, and I'm not too happy about the middle of a mountain, so soon I'll be climbing again. And I want us all to continue to climb. And Maryland Hunger Solutions will be part of that climb, and we're going to depend on all of you to do that with us. And I'm going to stop and try to answer questions and respond to comments if I can. But thanks very much for giving me an opportunity to chat with you.
Thank you, Michael J. I have some questions. Everyone on this call knows that I have lots of questions, if you've ever been here before. But I will pause and make sure that other people get a chance to ask questions first. I see a question from Michael.
Which one?
Michael Larkin.
That's you, Michael Larkin. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm in a lot of meetings where there's 3, 4, 5 Michaels. So, hi, thank you for your time and book recommendation, though I haven't read it. There's other books I read that covered a lot of the same themes, and this is like a 30,000 feet question, but it's something I confront all the time when I talk with neighbors, friends, colleagues, trying to get them more involved, and they'll challenge the statistics on poverty and saying, well, you know, you see growing per capita income for this or that, and post transferred, actually, it's not this bad. And living where I am, I guess here you lived in Montgomery County, there's a lot of smart Alex, I guess is the best way to put it. And you're constantly trying to push back on this, and at least I could tell them all about my mother and my brother before they met my father on food stamps, but it doesn't seem to break through. So how do you break through in conversations like that where the reality is challenged, and sometimes with some mathematics that, can make me look a little, I don't know what I'm talking about.
So I think it's a fair question. I have a couple of reactions. So many years ago, I was a door-to-door canvasser. And when you're a door-to-door canvasser, you don't convince everyone. you look for the people with whom you can have a conversation, and you have a conversation, and the people who slam the door in your face, thank goodness for them, because you don't waste time talking to them. It gives you more time to get to the people who you can. So first of all, you're not going to convince everyone. So some people don't want to be convinced. They believe what they believe, and nothing you say can convince them. So recognize that. You don't beat your head on the wall having that conversation if you can't win. Secondly, if people are willing to learn, there's data, there are books, there are experiences. They could spend time at Manna Food Center and actually see people coming in and struggling. If they wanted to, they could see what stuff that happens at the Capital Area Food Bank. There are many ways for people to learn if they are interested in learning. And I will say, there are folks on this call who can actually have that conversation. But I would say to you, understanding as you do, don't think that you can convince everyone of the reality that everyone has.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael and Michael. Good to see you, Michael Larkin, by the way. Thanks for joining. I have a question, Michael J., which is, what opportunities do you see? This has been a tough budget year. Can you just talk a little bit about the lay of the land and what potential opportunities you see in the medium term? We're almost done with this legislative session, but what makes you hopeful about Maryland?
Well, you presume that I'm hopeful, and I try to be hopeful. I try not to be cynical. Here's what I would say: the fact that I can talk to a legislator who doesn't know that $23 is the minimum that people are getting, that thousands of people are getting it. It's not that it makes me hopeful, but it makes me determined that I haven't had enough conversations, that I haven't educated enough people. And that's partly on me, but it's not only on me. We all have to undergo that. We all have to wake legislators up and let them know this is what's happening. This is what's real. And I don't mean physically grab them, please. I don't mean that. But we really have to have them understand that. And it's not like we haven't written to every legislator, but they don't read everything that gets to them. It's not like we haven't testified and said it, but they're multitasking even in hearings. They need to hear it multiple times from multiple people, because once we get that through to them, they'll recognize something needs to be done, and that what they're doing, while better, a little better, isn't enough. And so we've got to continue to have a conversation. One of the things I heard once that I thought was really well said is that when we're having these conversations, like this conversation, we're not preaching to the choir. We're talking to a parade. So I'm talking to people who've never heard me say some of these things before. And for some of you, you heard me say them before. But we have to continue to have the conversation because we're always educating new people. The parade goes by, it's a new group of folks, and they need to be able to hear it, and they need to be able to spread it as well. So I think that we're doing the best we can, and I think that understanding that we all need to do better is the thing that makes me a little hopeful.
I appreciate you accepting my framing of the question. Other questions? I see Mary applauding, and I saw some comments in the chat.
Michael, and I love you. I found one of the things when I first started this was discouraging because I kept hitting brick walls. And like you said, you're not going to get everybody's attention. But out of 100, if one hears you, then you've accomplished something. And so even I testified 3 days before my knee surgery on this bill. I couldn't let it go because this is real life. And when it's real life to you, it has a different flavor than if you're in a corporate, a committee, and I'm not downing anybody that does their job with organization, but this is reality. I have been 5 weeks without being mobile to the point of I had to think about, what am I eating? How am I eating? Those are the kind of things they need to know, not just from me, but there's other people that are in my building that are bedridden, that don't have families. So you just can't give up. You just can't. And I'm still sending emails. I'm still connecting to people that I find through different organizations like Community Advocacy Institute, or being an advocate for Capital Area Food Bank. If you start networking, you will find different people that are there for you. And Michael, you've always trusted me and allowed me to tell part of my story, but the story gets deeper. So I'm just saying, I'm not stopping. I'm always a testimony or a phone call away from anybody, but this is real. And when I testified, Michael, I knew they were going to use this as bartering chip, simply because they know whatever they give us, we have to take it. We have no choice. That's where they catch you. But if we keep pushing, one day they'll have a choice, and it'll be our choice. So I'm just thankful for you, Michael. I'm not giving up. I still talk, as you know, we met on the Zoom call the other night, because I'm always networking to find other people that I can bring to, and new ways of getting to how to get your story across. So I love you, Michael.
Thank you, Mary. I love you too. So I got two things. One, and I'm going to try to say this in as nonpartisan a way as I can. And then I'm going to tell a longer story about how struggle, the reason it's $23 and not 16 is because the Biden administration's Department of Agriculture decided to update the Thrifty Food Plan. And that's why it went up that little bit from 16 to 23 for everybody all across the country. And the House of Representatives has been so angry. They have been angry that they've done that. And they are furious that they have added a little bit more money to poor people all across the country, that they have refused to confirm the Deputy Assistant Secretary who's been doing that work. They just refused, because that's their power. And so it's a case of you do the right thing and you don't get rewarded. And so I just want to recognize that that's what happened. And I mean that in a nonpartisan way. That's exactly what happened. And that's that's why who's in power makes a difference. The second story I want to tell is about, everybody knows about the Civil Rights March in 1963, with Dr. King. It was organized by A. Philip Randolph. A. Philip Randolph wanted to do that march before. He wanted to do it in the 1930s, in the 1940s, and said to FDR, I'm going to have a march. I'm going to bring people to DC. And FDR said, don't do that. If you do that, who knows what will happen? And so FDR made some slight policy changes, and A. Philip Randolph didn't have the march. And then Truman is president. And he says, well, I'm going to have a big march in Washington, have a big civil rights march. And Truman's like, no, no, no. And Truman desegregates the armed services. Desegregates, he just does it in order to not have the march. And then 1963 comes and the march happens. Now, the march didn't happen the first time. It took decades to get there. And we all know that the march happened, but it didn't change everything, though progress happened after that. The Civil Rights Act, the Food Stamp Act happened in the 60s after that, the housing, all the stuff that happened. And I just want to take that in context. I've only been doing this for 11 years and I feel like we've made progress, but I know there's so much more to do. And I know Mary feels that way. And I know Rona feels that way. And I just want to keep that all in context that we got a lot more work to do together.
Do you think if they replace the good old Secretary of Agriculture that's been in there for 6 years, that don't give a hoot about nobody, that it might change if the right person was there?
So I'm gonna caution against that, Mary. And here's why. I think the change that happened, the one I talked about, the thrifty food plan, happened because this secretary let it happen. And I think if he's not secretary and somebody else is secretary, unless it's me or you, I don't think we're going to get other changes. The Congress is going to not let that happen. I don't want to blame the Secretary of Agriculture. I want to give them credit for what they've done.
Okay.
But also ask for more. That's what we do.
Okay.
Thank you. And I do want to note that we need to move on to the next agenda item in 3 minutes at the latest at 1:45, because Jack and I can just speed through those slides. So does anyone else have a question for Michael J? Jack?
Yeah, I wanted to ask a quick question, Michael J, and I think it relates to the SNAP supplement as well as the universal school meals, which I know you didn't get into, but I'm going to talk about a little bit as well. In cases like these where we know there's a fiscal reason behind why things aren't being passed and whatnot, how do you all as Maryland Hunger Solutions kind of approach knowing that it's coming again next year? So for universal school meals, where we've been doing this for a couple of years now and we're working in coalition, and it's obviously every year if it doesn't pass, it's extremely disappointing, but we immediately turn to, all right, what do we go next year and how do we continue? So I was wondering if you could just speak briefly about kind of that understanding when something fails. You've touched on this, that we keep going, but kind of how that planning works for understanding. Do we immediately keep going? Do we give those legislators a rest when it comes to sending letters, or is it something we immediately want to turn to and keep the pressure on? And universal school meals, I feel like, is just a good example for this year.
Yeah. So thanks. 3 things. First of all, I like the fact that you used the word failure, because that's what it is. We've asked the legislature to undertake this several times, and they have not done it. And the word that I associate with this is failure. Right. The second thing is, I think that what we do in the meantime is not just about legislative work. I had a conversation with MSDE yesterday. We're trying to figure out how we can get more school districts to take advantage of community eligibility, to expand it. They've got new numbers to be able to build on that. We can't, the legislature is not going to do that. But how do we as advocates work with food and nutrition directors and the Maryland State Department of Education to continue to build out what actually happens in schools and in school districts to expand community eligibility? That's the thing we're going to work on throughout the year, regardless of what's going on in the legislature. But the third thing I want to touch on, and I feel really strongly about this, is for those of us who are advocates, I am really unhappy with the purported compromise that instead of doing healthy school meals, we're going to do a study. A study isn't going to feed another kid. It's not going to address any family's challenges. And for advocacy groups, I understand why legislators want to do. Legislators need to be able to say, we got this, and we couldn't do this, but we got this. But for advocacy groups to accept this paltry study as any kind of a win, any kind of a compromise, makes me, I'll say, unhappy. That's the word I'll use. Because at the end of the day, are we aligned with legislators, or are we aligned with people experiencing poverty? And for folks whose organizations are aligned with legislators, then yeah, you want to be able to say, yeah, we understand you couldn't get it done, so yeah, we'll accept this compromise. I don't want to be associated with that compromise. I want people who are experiencing poverty to know that from our perspective, this doesn't help. It's not a compromise. It's not a victory. It is a failure. And to do less than that, I think, makes us aligned with just people who do policy because they do policy and because we're elected officials. That's not what we do. It doesn't help people's lives. It makes me angry, actually.
Thanks for sharing that perspective and more information, Michael J. I did see that Rona had a question in the chat about whether there will be scholarships to attend the National Anti-Hunger Policy Conference June 3rd through 5th. Michael, do you know?
I don't know. I can connect you with somebody, Michelle and Jack, to inquire about that, but I don't know.
I think I just had Leah do some
Yeah,
quick research.
I just did a quick look and it looks like there are, but I'm not sure if it's still open because it says the applicant should hear by March 22nd about their request. So maybe it's still open at this point, but I can just send the link in the chat real quick just so that everyone can get a look at it.
If you email it to me, I'll find the person at the Food Research and Action Center who you should connect with.
Okay, perfect.
Don't wait till the 22nd and find out it didn't happen. I say ask.
Great, thank you all. I think with that, I really want to thank Michael J. for being our featured speaker this month. It's always great to hear your perspective, and given the amount of time that you've been doing this work in Maryland, it's just wonderful to be a partner of yours and learn from you as we continue engaging more and more in the advocacy space as a food council, and continue to attempt to educate and bring folks along with us in our advocacy journey in this space. So thanks very much, Michael J.
Thank you.
Jack, back to you, I think, right?
Yep. With that, I'm going to share my screen. Let me make sure I always do this wrong because I have two screens up. Make sure I share the correct screen for an opportunity to look at just a few quick slides to really orient ourselves to this call, to the work of the Food Council. And Michelle says we are going to go through it because we've gone through these before, especially some of them. Michael J, just a heads up, you're in this first picture. I don't know if you knew that was coming, but letting you know. But really just wanted to orient people because when we last spoke about this, I believe it was in July of last year, and we set up a recording to talk about our policy priorities, which is on our YouTube page. We talked about the fact that our policy priorities work in a 2-year cycle. And we talked about that last year because we were coming to the end of one of our 2-year cycles, which means this year starts a new 2-year cycle. So we wanted to just touch on it again. And our policy priorities are a way for us as a staff to allocate our limited time, as well as use the issues that we are, plus our partners, whether those are our council members or our partners like Maryland Hunger Solutions, are able to make a unique impact on, and that we have the expertise between ourselves and those partners to come from an informed position. We also like to remind people that all of our advocacy decisions, I think is the right word to use, or advocacy actions that we take go through our policy committee. So we have a 5-member policy committee made up of council members that help us to guide our work. And those council members come from various sectors across the food system. And again, just add to the robustness of our already very smart staff, but give us the ability to make a difference in other areas as well that we're not all experts on. We always say that our policy priorities are focused at equity as a core and look at areas across the food system, especially areas that interact and areas that overlap, which as we find in our work, there's a lot of overlap in our work between SNAP and advocacy, obviously, between food waste and advocacy, between all these things. We like to use areas that we can engage on and areas that work across the food system. And it also helps us to create a structure and a way to focus our work. We have limited staff time, limited funding, and limited ability to do things sometimes. So this allows us to really focus our work on areas that we see and that our partners see as areas to make a real difference in Montgomery County. And the reason we bring this back up now is because we are in this 2-year cycle, a new 2-year cycle, excuse me. But you will notice that our first 3 policy priorities have stayed the exact same, essentially. We are still focusing on increasing food security in the county, increasing access to affordable land for food production, and increasing opportunities for local food and beverage procurement for MoCo-made businesses. Because these are areas that we were actively working on, and we didn't think that we could definitively say we have come to a conclusion, we decided it was important enough to carry over into our next 2-year cycle. Our 4th priority, though, is our newest priority. So we have recently added a priority that focuses on reducing food waste and supporting food recovery. We just launched that meeting a week ago. I believe it was last week. We launched that meeting for our kickoff meeting for this new working group that we are starting. And we really are using this working group for the next year as a space to learn more about the food waste space and food recovery infrastructure here in the county, so that we ensure that we're not duplicating the great work that's already done, but really adding value to an important space that we see a lot of overlap with those other areas of work as well. So, as I said before, our first three priorities here have stayed the same, and that work will continue while adding this priority around food waste and food recovery. And I'll make sure to share more information for those that are interested in the follow-up notes and email about that new working group of ours. With that, I wanted to just spend 2 minutes here really quickly talking about some of the policy work and advocacy work we have engaged on since we last met. We know this group hasn't been together since, I believe, either late November, early December. Around that time was our last call for last year. And there was a reasoning behind that, is that we participate, which Michelle will talk about, in the FSRC, the State Food System Resilience Council's weekly call around legislative ideas with the General Assembly session and bills, and felt like we would be duplicating efforts more than anything. So we have held this call until now as we get towards the end, but we did want to give an update on where we have been this year. So we, in 2024, have started, just so to align with our new policy priorities, a new policy tracker, which is public, and I'll make sure to share in the chat afterwards. So our new policy tracker, which is the same idea as our old policy tracker, but just updated for 2024 to start us off with a clean version. We've been active in the Maryland General Assembly session. As you can see, there's several bills which we weighed in on, and as they cross over, since we are now at that time in the session where bills are crossing over into the other chamber, we will mostly be submitting the same letters that we wrote for the other one. I say mostly because, as Michael J. has referenced, or had referenced, there were changes that were made to several bills. I think universal school meals is the best example of that. As Michael J. spoke about, with the original bill proposal was for universal school meals in the state, and we were very happy to support that. The amendment, as it crosses over, has turned that from to a study, essentially, of other studies with a fiscal note at 0. And as Michael said, we are just not happy with how that has shaken out this session. So we are figuring out our next steps as that crosses over, because we do not think we can submit the same testimony, because it is essentially a very different bill that is crossing over this year. We have also been able to sign on to many different letters this year, again, all in our public policy tracker. And most of these letters are support for these bills that we have written our testimony on. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle.
Thanks. Yeah, for more info on our positions on those bills that were referenced, feel free to click the link that I put in the chat. And I just, for 2 minutes, I want to touch on how we work with other organizations and partners on advocacy. And I do want to call out Rona and Mary again. I think we've mentioned them both a couple times during this call, but Rona and Mary are both members of our Community Advisory Board and have been really active in their advocacy on issues that they care about, despite the fact that our Community Advisory Board has not really been meeting yet this year, as we try to reimagine with some funding shifts how that's going to move forward. But certainly more to come, because we feel like that's an incredibly important area of our work that is not listed on this list. So just wanted to call that out specifically. We participate quite a bit with the Maryland Food System Resiliency Council. Michael J., I think, mentioned very briefly, he currently serves as the co-chair of that statewide food council, is kind of how you can think about it. I participate as a co-chair of one of the working groups that takes positions on behalf of this statewide food council. And so that's been where a lot of my time this legislative session has been spent, is learning about the bills in weekly public calls that you all can join if you're interested. They happen Mondays at 1. We'll definitely share more info about them in the notes. And that you can learn more about what's going on in the session in a lot of detail and ask questions of folks who are very knowledgeable. So it's an incredibly helpful call. Feel free to join us over there on Mondays at 1. I won't touch on any of this. But I will say that what some folks don't realize, I'm skipping to the very bottom, is that we also participate in quite a bit of state and regional collaboration because we are the largest food council in the state and the largest food council in the region. We're also one of only a few independent nonprofit food councils in the country. And so that sort of positions us to get pulled into a bunch of spaces where folks are interested in food council representation. One of those spaces is in the photo where I had the opportunity to go to Ohio State, my alma mater. I like to bring this up when Michael J's on the call, as he went to Michigan State. Yep. And it's a research study about regional food system coordination. And so the DMV region that coordinates under the Council on Government's leadership with Lindsay Smith, a few of us were able to go to Ohio State to participate with other regionally focused food council work that happens, which was very interesting. So Jack, next slide. Or is this the last one? No. The last thing I'll say is that I think this has been a tricky year at the state level because of the budget situation. So what we've tried to do is focus on quality over quantity and being very strategic and working with our partners who are more knowledgeable than we are, like the Maryland Hunger Solutions or others, to be to not just weigh in support of everything that crosses our desk, but to be strategic about which vehicle, like which bill we strategically want to move forward out of all the bills that exist. So Michael J didn't get into it, but there were like 6 or 7 different SNAP related bills. And we had to be very strategic to learn what that means and how we can promote something that has the highest likelihood of moving forward and actually impacting the SNAP space, for example. And then we will be continuing these calls on a monthly basis moving forward through the rest of the year, except November, December, because they happen at the end of the month. And so we'll probably combine those into one. But we hope to continue to feature partners in this space that we can all learn from, and also some local elected officials. So we'll be working on setting up future meetings, but we also want to hear from you. What are you interested in learning about? Who are you interested in hearing from? We have a survey, and we would love to get your feedback and learn what you want to get out of these calls. So thanks, Jack. We only have a minute left. So I'm sorry to say, if you have any updates, could you please send them to us via email or drop them in the chat, or feel free to stay on for an extra couple minutes and we'll stay here for a minute. But I do want to thank everyone for coming. Thank you again, Michael J, for sharing your expertise with us and your vision and your perspective. Thanks to Leah, our intern, who's done just such a great job over the last 6 months and has mostly stayed behind the scenes. So we want to make sure Leah introduced herself. And as always, thanks to the Food Council staff, our council members, our community advisory board members, and really this call, Jack, because Jack is the reason that this call has occurred today. So kudos to you, Jack, for all the work that you do.
Yeah, thank you. And I just wanted to add that we do have some upcoming events and whatnot, but I know we're at time, so I will make sure to include those in the follow-up emails. And like Michelle said, if there's anything else that anyone would like to be shared with this community in regards to upcoming events or anything really in the future, please feel free to reach out to me at any time. And I am happy to make sure they are shared amongst this advocacy community. With that, I'm going to stop our recording.